What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 173 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And today's episode is brought to you by Cycle CPA. If you need bookkeeping services, accounting, or CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Get that conversation started today and let them know How to Hardscape sent you for $200 off your package there. And we'll talk more about Cycle CPA later in this episode. But in today's episode, we have Martin Tirado of SIMA. This is the Snow and Ice Management Association, and I've been wanting to get more and more episodes surrounding winter work, especially for those that experience winter. Owning a hardscaping business can be difficult, deciding what you're going to be doing in the wintertime to keep your employees busy. So more and more you'll see episodes coming up here with winter type work, and obviously snow and ice management is top of mind right now if you're looking to get into it or to round up those accounts for the winter time. I myself have only done this once. I will likely not get into snow and ice management personally, but this is a viable option for many hardscapers in the industry to keep their crews busy in the wintertime. So this is just a basic starting out conversation with Martin Tirado of SIMA. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Today, we're joined by Martin Tirado. He is the CEO of the Snow and Ice Management Association, or SIMA, where their mission is to empower snow and ice management professionals for success. Martin, thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Mike. We greatly appreciate it. Glad to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time to be able to do this. I know snow and ice management must be top of mind for a lot of people listening into this podcast, whether you already own and operate a business as such or are looking to get into it. So, Martin, this is really a timely topic. But let's get started to learn a little bit more about you yourself, how you got into where you are today with SIMA CEO. Any stepping stones towards that or anything that you want to cover? Give our audience a little bit of context about yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been in organizational or association management my entire career. You know, kind of one of these things I say, like it or not, I'm in it now because it's been since really kind of going on close to 30 years. But what I've always kind of been working with is just typically just helping different organizations grow and get better, and working with board of directors to execute strategy, meet mission, vision of the organization, that kind of stuff. And 15 years ago, I had a great opportunity in my career to join SIMA, and I loved working for contractor groups. Prior, I was with a plumbing, heating, cooling contractor association, amongst a few others in the mix as well too. But just kind of really enjoyed, this group is really kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, the business owners and people, professionals that work in these companies are really kind of, I'd say, very humble and down to earth, and really just trying to perform an essential service in their local communities. And it's been a great group of people to work with. So we have a staff of 12. We're located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin headquarters, but we actually have remotely we have some of our half of our employees are anywhere, so we're kind of in this full kind of full virtual, which we've more and more people have adopted um, as a business model that have some flexibility. So that's worked out well. But great group of people. And SIMA's we're governed by a board of directors, and that board of directors is a diverse mix of basically a couple of manufacturers in the industry, but predominantly snow and ice contractors, service providers. Who perform snow and ice services. And of course, probably what you're very familiar with is also similar services in the summertime. They're doing anything from landscaping, lawn maintenance, design build, tree care, anything that's kind of the exterior services field is what our members are in as well.
So getting into this, talking about snow and ice management, I actually myself don't operate in the wintertime. I don't do snow and ice management, but I know a lot of our listeners have been requesting somebody to come on to talk about this. So perfect to have you here, Martin. And getting right into it here, let's talk about wanting to get into snow and ice management. Let's start with those little stepping stones. Give our audience like a little bit of some advice in terms of networking or getting in with property managers or becoming a subcontractor for a landscaper to kind of get that ball rolling, maybe even taste it before they actually try it out on themselves. Where would you recommend somebody just getting into the industry, getting those first steps and meeting with people or getting those initial contracts? How would you kind of give some advice for that?
Yeah, let me frame this with the opportunity that's out there. And the research that we've done, and this is just in the private sector. So this excludes anything that's a public, municipal town highway work. In the private sector, snow and ice in the United States is a $20 billion industry with 88,000 businesses. In Canada, it's a $4.4 billion industry with 18,000 businesses. So that kind of tells you that um, there's just a lot of opportunity out there. These are kind of local entrepreneurial type of people. It's a lot larger than people realize, and I think probably predominantly because it's kind of a hidden and sometimes taken for granted service that's performed. It's middle of the night, it's weekends, it's when you could work 3 straight days in a row with some back-to-back snowstorms, or you get a big blizzard that can take a lot of time to do the full clearing. That you know sometimes people go to sleep at night and they wake up and they think some kind of magic happened, but what's happened is there's been thousands of people working with equipment to perform snow and ice as essential service. But that to frame that is like, how do you get into it? And what I would do is what we see is use those local contacts that you have. I'd recommend, or Simon would, is like, you start small. Look at your local community and the people that you're kind of working with now on the landscaping or exterior services side, and see which of these are companies that absolutely do need and value snow and ice services. And of course, if they have a paved surface, a parking lot or a driveway to sidewalks, they're going to need it. You're going to need it in some capacity, unless, there's residential, they do it themselves, but they're going to need it in some manner. And so you can kind of start there, or um, definitely get involved in like your local business community, like a chamber of commerce, or better business bureau, those types of things, to kind of develop some relationships there. And then for bigger projects, you may actually want to tap into being a subcontractor. But you look at your local area. I would say some of the larger landscape contractors are all performing snow and ice services. If you're in a cold weather environment, which you and I both are, and the audience in this, many of them probably are, that get some kind of snow and ice, they have to, whether you like it or not, some ways they kind of have to do it in the wintertime to be a year-round service provider for your customer. And so possibly, it's very hard to kind of just walk into a large facility, whether that's an Amazon or Walmart and Target, and say, "Hey, where can I talk to the property manager?" Usually those decisions are made at a corporate level. So that's where, kind of working with one of your local landscapers that you've seen their trucks around, their equipment around, on even if it's placed on sites that does snow and ice work. They're all looking for people, like every other industry. There's a shortage of people that want to do this, and if you're willing to work and at odd times and invest, there can be certainly some nice profits made from this, and be able to keep you kind of working and generating income year round. So that's kind of a little bit on the contractual side. If you want to go to the equipment side, is people may already have these relationships. Is It's your local dealer distributor. They probably are also a dealer distributor for a plow and a spreader company. And there's different sizes that obviously there's, large, heavy equipment that may be more when you start to grow your business, that you acquire and you get people to work on that. But if you're talking about, your typical work truck and doing mounting a plow and even a spreader on the back, you can get that through your local dealer distributor. And all it takes is really to be able to get a few of those contracts, if through that network that you make locally. And I always kind of frame this as well too, is like, this is what I would call a low barrier of entry business. A lot of exterior services are, really kind of, you just need some of the proper equipment and a couple of contracts, and you're in business in snow and ice.
And great advice there to get started. I like the idea of, starting out small. I did that with my own business, but also I tried snow and ice management for a winter. Uh, Turns out it wasn't exactly for me, but it is. I do like the idea of going out at night and have nobody on the road, and I'm just going and doing one thing and plowing that snow and making that money. But with that, being a subcontractor is a great way to kind of get started and to lean on the expertise of somebody else in order to be able to go out there. Also, get to know the equipment, what works best for you, the best practices in the industry for actually being out there in the field. So, I love the idea of getting started as a subcontractor to see if it is right for you in your business, right?
Yeah, it's a good way, like you said, it's a good way to test whether you really want to get into this business or not. And if you do really enjoy it, and some people have a real passion for it, that's where again you can, start local and kind of grow from there. Probably can open some doors and just even maybe some smaller properties. Think of like, the gas stations or banks or and there's a lot of independent businesses out there that are kind of looking for a, local contractor to perform some of these. You can kind of then that's kind of how you can grow on that. And we certainly have some members that have a mix of they have their own direct contracts through customers, and there's some that they're subcontractor for. Again, some of these big nationally, again, talking about I mentioned the retail chains, but think of the large property management companies. Again, decisions are made at a corporate level. It's probably, some of those is good to have a mix of you're a subcontractor for someone who has those agreements with a large property management company, and having a mix can be good too. And you could kind of really then take off from there to however you really want to go with it.
Getting into that, in terms of acquiring these clients and getting that ball sort of rolling there, I want to talk about a good time to start reaching out to, say, property managers. Say you're ready to take the next step beyond subcontracting. What is a good time to really get this ball rolling, get contracts signed, get people signed up? Are we a little bit too late at that right now at this time, being that it's late September when we're doing this interview? Or are there going to be people scrambling last minute up to that snowfall that we can kind of, hope to get that last minute sign up as well?
Yeah, combination of both. And
Yeah.
glad you brought this up. Today, first day of fall and or mid-September. I know this may be produced next week or something, but we have a procurement timeline, and the best practices for procuring of snow and ice is by September 1st to have all your contracts and agreements with your properties and facilities you're going to perform services on. And of course, I go talk to people and I do a little bit of speaking here and there. I always ask the audience around this time of year, even getting into October, I'm like, who here has 100% of their contract signed? And by and large, I only get a very small handful of people that are kind of really well ahead of time. And typically those are people that have renewed past, renewal customers. So they're just doing a lot of the same work they did in the past, and they might be on multiple years. But um, the what you see in the supply chain issues that are happening now is it takes a lot in order to be ready for snow and ice. And there's a cost to that as well too. And you need to have that September 1 date if you can. Again, it's the best practice to be able to have it's the equipment, the materials, salt or treated salt. Maybe you're going to even get into liquids if you get more experienced. Let's say you even have to have equipment that's placed on site on a property. That takes a time to obtain and get that set up and staged and ready. And this gives you some time, and even with that is the people. If you do get to a point where you have some employees, and some people here may have many already, it's tougher to get people to do the work, and you're going to need time to do some recruiting if you have properties that need this work performed. So again, the sooner the better. Sure enough, I wouldn't say, mid-September is no time if you want to get into it and add a few customers. Don't give up. Everybody's looking for people to do this work. And sure enough, we hear all the time like, oh, I had this contract out to a customer back in August, and now it's November 1, and sure enough, the weather says we're gonna get snowfall the next 48 hours, and finally they called me and said, hey, I'm sending you that contract back. So it happens at the last minute too. Um, so but put it this way, September, now's the time.
I just want to take a break from today's episode to talk about our sponsor, Cycle CPA. You may have a CRM or project management software in place, but what data are you using to ensure your estimating is accurate? Having a proper accounting setup and accurate bookkeeping done is key to understanding overhead expenses and other costs that must be recouped in your estimates. Cycle CPA is a remote bookkeeping and CFO firm that helps to connect the dots from the financial reports to the hardscape and landscape data needed in order to reach high profits. They provide landscape and hardscape industry benchmarking, job costing financials by service line, advisory meetings, and much more. Cycle CPA's team of accountants are specialized within the hardscape and landscape industry, and you can visit them at cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. Continuing on that, I'm sure a big thing is, or I know a big thing is insurance. And I do want to talk about that with you. Being in Ontario, I know even just outside of the industry looking in, insurance is a difficult thing, not only to just acquire, but to maintain and continue on. Very costly. I just kind of want your 2 cents on insurance. Is that something that you see in the States as well? This difficulty of getting insurance for the snow and ice management. And also if you could maybe like what are some next steps that we can what are the next steps for getting affordable insurance for these snow and ice management companies? Because like you said, this is a necessity in the wintertime, both here in Ontario, Canada, and in the States, I'm sure the northern states. This can't go away. So just your 2 cents, if you want to, on insurance.
Yeah, no, I was actually just recently in Toronto, outside of Toronto, Landscape, Ontario. They hold a 1 day symposium event. And that was actually predominantly some of the conversation they were happening was presentations on insurance. And there's a self-insured retention group that's formed there, but mainly on insurance and making sure you have adequate coverage and affordability because it's gotten much more costly and more carriers have gotten out of the market. They can kind of call it now a hard market. And that's actually happening in the United, I think it actually happened in the United States 5 to 10 years ago, kind of over time. So companies here in the States are facing it as well too. And one of the general challenges of the importance of it is through some market research we did. This kind of comes from Zurich, which is a large carrier. Is of all the slip and fall claims that are paid out, 25% of them come from snow and ice services. So you just think about every time that someone trips on a stairs or a crack in a sidewalk or concrete or really anywhere, 25%, 1 in 4 is related to snow and ice. So there's a big risk right there. And that shows that, and that's kind of where some of the, insurance carriers get a little, sensitive or delicate as to who they're going to cover, insurance wise. So, we kind of rely on really kind of the safety best practices in this, and that's a variety of things. But it's really kind of looking at documentation, doing some weather reporting, having some kind of either safety, making sure you have the right personal protective equipment combined with a safety training that you do in your company. Even if even there's some readily available training videos that both SIMA and some other entities have as well too that kind of give you some of the essential best practices training that you do those things. And if you're brand new to getting into the snow and ice industry, is look at like kind of your loss history, your claim history, and whatever exterior services that you do. Just talking with some insurance carriers, whether it's if you've been a safe company on the landscaping side, they're going to see you as more insurable on the winter services side. And the more that you do in that realm, the more that you're going to be protected on some of the slip and fall claims because you have this documentation, you have some training, and particularly for the documentation, people know this is it's come a long way in 15 years. Software has gotten way better. There's a number of companies that provide great software services on tracking of people and services performed. Mobile via your phone or a tablet that you can then keep in in your file storage electronically versus kind of the old paper copies of stuff. So some of those best practices are really critical, and the more that you can do, the better. And it's not easy. This is an industry that absorbs a lot of risk, and to be able to be prepared to kind of take on that risk. And what we're doing, we're kind of looking at is right now we're in communication with different insurance brokers and carriers to just talk about, hey, if you had kind of the ideal snow and ice company or snow and ice person, if it's an independent, one person contractor that you see as an insurable client, what are the things, the components that they have? And so it's like, how long in business? What's the claim history? What's the size of the business? What percent are they in other industries? Again, how much are they doing in landscaping or hardscaping, tree care, whatever that is, kind of taking a look at all these different factors. And so that's what we're working on right now, is trying to put that together so that we can kind of go to companies and say, hey, if you can kind of do the more that you can do of these items, the more that you're going to fit into an insurable company. And that's going to be able to stabilize insurance rates and those premiums and make sure that you have the coverage that you need.
Excellent. Yeah. Discussion around insurance, as well as I'm just going to read this right off of the SIMA website here. Your vision: snow and ice management professionals and those who benefit from their services adhere to the highest industry standards. I want to ask you about that. What are some industry standards that you like to see being adhered to, that you promote at SIMA? Even if you want to choose a specific company, you don't have to name names, but you kind of look at that company as, setting highest industry standards, and you can kind of use them as an example in certain cases. But at SIMA, what are those industry standards that you want to see snow and ice management professionals adhering to?
Yeah, so we have an ANSI, American National Standards Institute standard that's been approved that is a procurement standard. And so it talks about just how to procure the standards in procuring snow and ice services. There's also our best practices and the checklist with that. So you kind of hit on it, is with that, with that vision, is it's one thing to create them. The next big challenge is actually getting adoption. And a lot of companies, more and more companies are kind of adopting these, but we need to get, by and large, you need to get as many, if not 100% of the industry practicing these items, these standards, as much as possible. And you kind of take a look at the procurement standard, it really kind of talks about the scope of work and level of service, and making sure that that's very clear between the service provider and the customer or the client, what those are. Scope of work, again, is what exactly you're doing. What's the scope of that project? Are you doing the entire property and sidewalks and the loading docks and the front entry? There's some areas maybe you aren't, depending on what the customer is. And then your level of service is kind of, what you think of it is, there's properties that no snow and ice at any time. Just think of like hospitals or 24-hour, shipping, warehousing facilities, things like that. Like you hear the term too, no tolerance. And so that's the level of service. And there's some that might have a different tolerance on what that level of service is. So that standard talks about, some of the things I mentioned earlier. It's not only scope of work and level of service, but also the documentation. And what is in that documentation? There's several things about it. It's weather tracking and reporting. You need that. You need to know what type of equipment are on property during when these services are performed, what times those services are happening, what kind of personnel do you have on that property at what time. And again, this is where software can be a great impact for companies to adopt. It's really kind of some of those things, and I definitely think that some of the leading companies are definitely practicing these. Kind of gets into even like, what are your safety documentations that you have. You're making sure that you have trained operators who go through some kind of some type of regular safety training, whether that's even just a weekly quick kind of roundup on looking at different pieces of equipment, to even more in depth, whether it's certifications or that type of training. Um, and even, in Canada, there's a group of Canadian snow contractors now that are working on a CSA. It's a Canadian standards, and I actually thought that had a lot of potential. It looked really exciting, just talking about it with some Canadian contractors, because it's done through like a kind of a quasi government entity, where in the United States, ANSI is kind of an independent. You don't have to get it. It adds kind of a seal of approval, where it seems like if you get the CSA Canadian standard, you almost have like a government entity that's kind of giving the seal of approval, which I actually think is even better. Um, so that's going to take some time to kind of develop, but there's a group of people that are really committed to putting together a very thorough standard. I think that's going to do make a lot of help. But does that kind of help answer your question? I mean, it's kind of like this level of service, and some of these things you can get on our website. We'll hit that kind of later on, but at SIMA.org, these the standard and the best practices can be downloaded on our website.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. It was more of like a broad ranging question, anyways, with that. But you did mention things like salt. With that, I've heard in the past there's been salt shortages. Obviously, I'm not plugged into the industry completely here, but how do contractors kind of prepare for, say, a salt shortage, or are there alternatives to salt that you could kind of point them towards to do a little bit more research on? Just salt in general, how do you even know that there's going to be a salt shortage, and preparation for that, and maybe even alternatives to that solution as well?
Yeah, there really isn't a great way to know whether there's going to be a shortage or not. There's been at least two in the 15 years I've been involved, and maybe even three, but I remember two significant ones, and it really kind of there's kind of some random supply chain issues that arise and that leads to them. And there are some emerging alternatives, but when it comes to cost and price, salt is still the most effective at melting snow and ice at a price point that's affordable and kind of achievable for snow contractors to obtain, to use. But when we've always kind of adjusted, and it's difficult because it takes money to do this, but to really um, protect yourself against these salt shortages, you have to be prepared to purchase a significant amount of salt in advance, kind of well before the season starts, and to have a place to store that supply of salt. For alternatives, there are companies that are moving more into some non-chloride um, products that are kind of emerging. They're typically on the liquid side, but even a lot of liquids are contain chlorides as well too. So some of that really kind of comes into play if you're in an environmentally sensitive area, or maybe a watershed or near a lake district that is sensitive to some type of chloride contamination. But liquids, I would say, is it's more of a complex. There's more 'cause the equipment's different and how you apply it's different. But one other way that like kind of more of an essential way to make your salt supply more effective and last longer is pre-treating. Pre-treating your salt supply with a liquid. Typically, you kind of talk to all the people that both apply it and even manufacturers that supply the liquid. It gives you 30% more effectiveness. So that kind of gives you basically you can use 30% less and get the same results. And that can be from anywhere from treating your salt in advance. So you spray your salt pile, to actually having this equipment that does it at point of distribution. A liquid tank combined with a salt carrier that's in the back of a truck, and when it's distributed out and sprayed out on paved surfaces, the liquid mixes with the salt, and they're applied that way. So kind of at the point of distribution. So both are very effective and can kind of lower your commitment to having large amounts of salt in advance. And like any kind of supply kind of item, is always have a couple of resources kind of in your back pocket. Don't rely on, when it comes to salt, if you can, try not to rely on just kind of one entity as your resource. Maybe have a couple other people. Maybe you buy your salt from a couple different entities, basically to kind of hedge to make sure that they actually have enough salt for to provide you as a customer.
Excellent points there. And like you kind of mentioned there, salt, I'm sure, is very much a regional, even down to the municipality thing, or even just treatment in general. So going back to what we said, or you said at the beginning there, working as a subcontractor to kind of pick up these certain best practices in your specific area could be a very beneficial thing for that. Uh, Also documentation software to help you with your routes and to help you with liability. Do you see a lot of companies taking a lot of pictures, taking a lot of video these days in terms of absolving themselves of certain liability? Does everybody take a picture before they plow a certain property and then afterwards get a timestamp so that they have that? Does this help in any way, shape, or form? Absolve them of any liability, say something was to happen. Just talking about documentation in general, do you see a lot of contractors going that route? Pictures, video, constant.
Yeah, exactly. Before and after is and more people are doing that. It's becoming significantly more common, particularly with more. There's kind of cameras everywhere now, whether we kind of like it or not. A lot of properties actually even own them, and if you can kind of tap in, but into what's on those cameras, but combined with before and after of your own of um, the services that you perform or that operator has, if it's someone that you know that's working for you, have them do it or do it kind of do it yourself. But that before and after photo is absolutely essential. And um, I've seen some examples where they've actually come and shown like not only on the risk on the slip and fall side of it, but also just of people like, hey, I thought were you out here? And they say, yeah, look at what I have a picture here where we were there from 5 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. And unfortunately, by 9 a.m., it's still been snowing, an inch an hour or something like that. So then it's like, oh, you have to come back. But that kind of helps on the billing and financial end of it. If you're billing on like a per time per event, that's what kind of helps. Verify that you can invoice services and is that documentation of that you were there. So, and then absolutely, I think that on that slip and fall, that before after is going to definitely will help you on claims and the legal process if a slip and fall claim kind of goes to more advanced and potentially going to a court case. Having that is going to be a pretty essential that shows that you did what you were hired to do. There is some natural accumulation in snow and ice that you just can't prevent. You just can't catch it as it's falling out of the sky. But you were there at the right time and you performed what you were contractually obligated to do. Things that happen in between then, they just kind of happen. That's why they're called accidents. And there definitely have been, now there's just been really a lot of examples of companies that are doing that well that are protecting themselves against these claims.
Just kind of coming to, I guess, a close here. SIMA best practices. We've covered a lot in this wide-ranging interview, and this is kind of the direction that I wanted to go with this. This is the first time we've had a snow and ice management professional on the podcast, so great to have it being broad range. Are there any other best practices, Martin, that you've seen from other companies or that SIMA promotes that we haven't really even touched on here in this interview?
That's kind of most of them from like a broad understanding, kind of big picture. If you really want to get into kind of the depths of them, it's like kind of, our website, there's probably some other resources I'm sure out there by a lot of the software companies have some really nice training of what to do. It's not just using their software; it's kind of what you should know and when working in snow and ice services. But yeah, and then also I would say kind of one of the things that we do in other organizations as well is it's the networking. It's can listen to a podcast, for example. You're tapping into a network of other professionals and other people, and you do that by going to in-person meetings. Do it through virtual these days. There's a lot of virtual kind of um, training programs or virtual networking. We run some. There's other groups that do it as well too, and it's really kind of like, hey, you meet with someone that how can we help each other? How can we do it better? Hey, what's working for you? How are people recruiting people? How are you retaining people? How are you getting new contracts? You're right. It's like you're just getting into it. What are some of the sales methods that you're using? How you get in the door? Um, and so I just highly encourage people to do that. You kind of have to, I would say, kind of break out of, your own environment, kind of break out of your, and challenge yourself to change and maybe get a little bit better and, try to meet some new people. And I think the more that you do and whatever professional service that you're in, you're going to learn a lot more about how to improve yourself and improve your company.
Excellent advice. And that's SIMA.org. That's SIMA, Snow and Ice Management Association.org. You also
Got
have a
it.
podcast as well there?
Yeah, we do. It's called Snow Talk. There's a link to it on our website. But if you actually look up in any of the podcast platforms, just look up Snow Talk, and then we have a podcast on there where we do talking again a lot about some of the same things, different challenges on different weather environments, how other stories of how some people have succeeded in this business. Some of these, safety and training items. So yeah, just go, search that up. And then, of course, if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, certainly willing to help you see what challenges that you have and maybe guide you in the right direction. I'm at martin@sima.org. That's my email. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect, Martin. Just any closing things that you want to say here in terms of the future of SIMA? What do we have looking forward to with SIMA? Any events that you'll be at, that you'll be hosting, and what does a typical SIMA event look like in terms of the educational content and networking that we would get out of an event like that?
Yeah. So our main flagship event is the Snow and Ice Symposium. We hold it annually in the middle of June, the third week of June every year. And next year in 2023, it's going to be in Hartford, Connecticut in mid-June. And we kind of call it the greatest, 3-4 days of snow and ice. And what it is, it's 2 days of a trade show. And then well over, I don't know, now we're up at probably over 30 different educational topics and speakers that you can learn from anything from sales, estimating to operations um, to leadership and business development. Really kind of cover all the topics. And then, of course, there's 2,000 total attendees. And what it is you get 2,000 people together who are talking snow and ice and how to get better in snow and ice, and just great things just kind of happen on sharing those resources. A lot of times, too, it's really a business to business development as well. We have a lot of people that have obtained a lot of new contracts and customers through those relationships. It's like, oh, hey, you're in this city. Well, you're kind of, maybe you're adjacent to where I have a couple where I'm working, but I have some accounts over there where I need someone to kind of perform, and then vice versa. There's almost like an exchange of, again, this B2B where you can actually earn a lot of stories I've heard of people exchanging and really hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential business at the Snow and Ice Symposium. So certainly encourage anyone that you're curious. That's really kind of the big flagship event in Snow and Ice.
Awesome, Martin. Thank you so much for this interview.
Yeah, glad to be here, Mike. Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Once again, check out Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Mention How to Hardscape. Get $200 off bookkeeping, accounting, or CFO services. I really do appreciate you tuning into today's episode. If you have any winter type service work or things that you want to get into, reach out to us at How to Hardscape to let us know what that is, and maybe we can round up an interview surrounding getting into that work or just installation, whatever that might look like for that type of work, especially as we are getting close to the end of the season here as winter begins to approach. Leave us a rating, review, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to us. Share these episodes. This really helps us get this podcast out there into more people's ears. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.